Hi, I'm Ben,
And I'm Josh.
and this is a Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about life, games, and other things, and we're back for episode 6.
I love it. 6 whole episodes, and people are still kind of listening to us.
Yeah, well, maybe we can pander to the people a bit and gripe for a little while about daylight savings time.
Is that pandering to the people? Have people been griping to you about daylight savings time?
Do you know anyone that likes daylight savings time?
So this is an excellent thing about living in Arizona is I don't know anybody that even talks about daylight savings time.
Well, if you have friends on social media and stuff, certainly you've seen the one I've seen is like a photo of Cher with a photo macro where she's saying, if you could turn back time, get ready, or something like that.
So I don't know. I guess I'm super insulated from daylight savings time because I have not seen any of it. I will say that when I lived in places that had daylight savings time, I had nothing but contempt for it. Because I always ended up on night shift, like working during daylight savings time. And so we would all fall back, and then we just end up working an extra hour. And then your supervisors just kind of shrug like, oh, well, I guess you just have to work another hour.
Wow, I hadn't thought about that. When you guys were on like nights, you just have to work an extra hour.
Yep, we'll just have to sit here and work for a 9-hour shift instead of an 8-hour shift.
But in the spring, if you were on when it was spring forward, you just had 1 hour shorter of a shift.
That's true. I don't remember what shift we were on when that happened, but I always felt like I was trying to sleep during that time, and so it just screwed me over then too. But that's just me wanting to remember things badly.
Speaking of screwed over, so we need to tell the audience about the mishap we just had. So today in Illinois was daylight savings time, the 3rd of November. Not only was it my sister's birthday, but it was also fall back, where you set your clocks back an hour. So we'd done that dutifully last night, and thankfully to our digital devices that do it on our own, and we got up, and the kids had already gotten up early for church and gotten ready, so that was a load off. And I went to church, and I came back, and I'd forgotten my phone in my car, and I went back out to get it after like a half hour, and I had like 4 messages from you. I was like, oh crap, what happened? And I looked at it, and you're like, dude, aren't we going to start? And I realized, and I'd forgotten that Arizona doesn't do daylight savings time, and that I was an hour late in your mind for starting the podcast.
Yes, and I was sitting here in my office, I texted you before, like, hey, I'm going to be like 10 minutes late, and you didn't say anything. And then I got out here and I got all set up, okay, I'm back, I'm ready. And then I called you on Skype, and there was no answer. I didn't even think about daylight savings time. I acknowledged, I knew, when it happened a couple of days ago, it comes up on the computer, like you said, with social media. I'm like, oh, it's daylight savings time, isn't that great? And then it just immediately fell out of my head because it doesn't affect me at all.
You were like, isn't that great? I don't have to worry about this at all.
I always go through the same little thing in my head with daylight savings time. Like, oh, daylight savings time was terrible because I always had to work longer or get less sleep. And then the other thing was how I actually didn't know what daylight savings time was until I went to college, I think. I went to college in Colorado, which does daylight savings time. And then everybody's like, oh, yeah, remember to set your clocks back. And I had to look at somebody like, what are you talking about?
So you grew up in Arizona your whole childhood and then moved to Colorado where they had daylight savings time, and it was new to you.
It was new, and it blew my mind why do we do this? And then everybody's kind of shrugged like, well, I don't know. I'm like, well, this seems really dumb. And they're like, it is kind of dumb, but everybody does it.
So you have the classic outsider perspective where it's new to you, and we all of us that have been doing it our whole lives just take it for granted.
Right. So, and you look up the history of daylight savings time, and with Benjamin Franklin, and all the classic things that everybody talks about whenever daylight savings time rolls around, but it just doesn't make any sense. So in Arizona, yeah, we don't change our clocks, so it seems like it gets dark really early, but nobody cares. I mean, we just go about our lives. We have
yeah,
lights.
I'm with you. This just feels like a classic case of cultural momentum. Like, why don't we use the metric system?
Yeah. Well, and CGP Grey has a great video on his YouTube channel about daylight savings time and how it does nothing but cause problems for people across the world.
See, I think when he makes videos like that, like how to board an airplane or why to do away with daylight savings time, he's trying to fix something that's broad cultural thing that has an impact on him that he would like to change so that it's less of an inconvenience to him.
I'm glad you put it that way because I feel exactly the same way. If I had the dedication or the skill set and the ability to create something and put it out in the world, I would absolutely use that power to just complain and gripe about things that bothered me.
All right, so what would be a top one on your list that if you had the skills in the audience that you could try to change our society, what would it be?
I think the number one thing that would make society better would be the mechanics of our current voting system. First past the post versus single transferable.
Yeah, and that's another one he did a video on, which was good, by the way. Yeah, I think that would definitely change our system a lot.
Well, and like I've said this
President
before,
Trump right now.
yeah, as an impromptu like political thing. Hey, we should change how we vote. But I'm a big proponent of if something is messed up, like it's not like people kind of usually shrug it like, well, that's just the system. Well, let's look at the underlying rules of the system, figure out why it's messed up, and figure out what changes we can make to keep the system fair, but also fix the problems that we currently have.
What would I do if I had a bully pulpit and a way to influence people's thinking? I don't know. I'd have to think about that.
If you had a 15-foot soapbox and people would listen to you when you stood on it.
Yeah. I can't think of anything off the top of my head right now. I mean,
is that a viable answer? Like, you put me on the spot and I had to pull something out of the air, but you just gonna say, no, I want to think about it. That's not fair.
All right.
Just say what's the last thing that happened in your life that bothered you, that is irritant, that is constant and recurring?
Okay. So when my daughter got hit by the car, it was because there was a lady directing traffic at a four-way intersection. I hate that. I hate when people are trying to be polite or something and they're changing the norms. But I don't know how to express that in like a cultural problem that we need to fix in our society. We need more roundabouts.
No, okay, nope. All right, we have one roundabout in close to my town, and nobody in this state knows how to use the roundabout properly. Inevitably, I'm stuck in a line of 5 people that refuse to dart out into traffic because everybody's supposed to like yield and merge into each other and zipper in, right? Nobody does that. They wait until there are no cars coming at all before they go, or even worse.
That's like worse than a four-way stop.
It is. And what's even worse is the people that are in the roundabout that then stop and start flagging the people that are waiting to get into the roundabout to go through. Because people in this country just don't know how to use roundabouts correctly.
Did you see the Mythbusters episode about roundabouts?
Not about roundabouts. I saw the one where they just drove in a big circle.
Yeah, that's it. They got a parking lot and like a bunch of volunteers and cars, and they set up a four-way intersection, and then they reconfigured it and set up a roundabout. And basically, their experiment showed that the roundabout was like 30% more throughput than a four-way intersection.
Yeah, that's why roundabouts exist, because they are more efficient if everybody knows how to use the roundabout correctly.
And they reduce the risk. I mean, you'll never have a T-bone collision at high speed. It turns every collision, if there were to be one, into an indirect low-speed collision.
That's true. I'm going to take your solution to this to the next step. Instead of having more roundabouts and teaching people in America how to use roundabouts, we just need to cut people out of the loop entirely and just go straight to self-driving cars.
Yeah, I'm totally in favor of that. I can just imagine cars approaching an intersection and they just interlace speed so that they go through the intersections, at a slight near miss.
Yes, I don't. Even if people don't get behind that, even if that freaks people out, even if self-driving cars have to do the same four-way stops that we do now, the fact that they will all accelerate and decelerate together and smoothly and coordinate better would reduce the amount of traffic, reduce the amount of time that you spend traveling, and reduce fatalities from vehicle crashes.
No way. I want Jetsons traffic where they're just like zoom, 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 right past each other, barely not colliding.
Yeah, I agree. Like I'd be nervous the first time, but just like anything else, you get used to it, right? The problem with self-driving cars that's going to happen is people are going to demand that they are perfectly safe, that a self-driving car never injures or hurts another human being, which is impossible because other human beings are idiots. Sorry, go ahead.
It's okay. I didn't want to end up fully down the self-driving car tangent. Okay. So I was going to try to go back to daylight savings time.
All right, we'll put self-driving cars on the list.
So I know you like you said, you don't have to think about it a lot because you live in Arizona and you moved back to Arizona. But for the time that you were like a sojourner in a foreign land and you were living daylight savings time, did you find that there was anything useful about it?
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, there's the one, what is it, fall back is the good one because you get the extra sleep. But then spring forward comes around and everybody hates it.
Unless you're a parent with young children and they didn't get the memo and they come jump on your head at the same time and it doesn't matter.
See, it doesn't. That's what doesn't make any sense. It's like, why are we as a society all agreeing to turn our clocks back? Because inevitably, all that does is somebody's going to get left behind. Somebody's going to forget. Somebody's not going to get the memo. And it's just going to be worse.
Yeah, and it creates a little like mini Y2K every time. Like, how do I change the clock on my car dashboard or my microwave or my oven or my alarm clock or my watch or and on and on and on. It's ridiculous. I wish we could see it end. I'd like to make a prediction. I think in the next 15 years we'll see an end to it in the United States. It would just take one good political candidate with that as like a pet peeve of theirs, and it could probably come to an end.
No, that's the problem with things that need political backing is the inertia. Like things that have been around for so long are just never going to go away. Just like pennies. Pennies are useless, but we're still going to print pennies.
But sometimes we manage these massive moves and transformations. Like I read about how Sweden changed from driving on the left-hand side of the road to driving on the right-hand side of the road. Man, that's a fascinating thing if you want to read about that.
Yeah, that would be that's a hard change there.
They prepared for it. They picked the day, and then on that day, when you got up to go to work, instead of driving on one side of the road, you drove on the other side of the road, and just everyone had to do it.
You know, I read about those things too, like how Australia, it was fairly recently, I want to say it was like the 90s or the 80s, got rid of their weapons. Like they used to have
they
guns
did mass confiscations of firearms.
Yes, and now they don't have firearms in Australia, and that blows my mind that something like that could happen. But I just don't feel like the way our political system works, it'll just never work.
Well, I think we could do that. I think that's in the realm of the possible.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the key difference between Ben and myself. Ben is an optimist looking on the bright side, wants to believe the best in people, and I'm on the other end of that spectrum. We balance out the podcast very well.
All right. Well, I'm sorry for jacking you around when we were supposed to start the time of the podcast because I forgot that Arizona doesn't have daylight savings time.
Not a problem. I actually had some time to play some Magic Arena. Don't tell my wife. I was actually out here downloading pictures off our camera and doing important business things.
So Magic Arena is not approved by Nicole, but doing a podcast with me is?
No, Magic Arena is not approved when there are chores to be done.
I see. Okay.
It's an opportunity cost thing.
Now, I think there was another cleanup thing we had. I think there was a family story you have that you were going to tell me.
I was going to tell you a family story?
The kid balcony hanging story?
No, that's your story. All right, so no. Yeah, I have this in the notes, and it was just a question. It was actually brought up to me by a listener, and they asked, how has Ben never heard the story of his kid hanging from the second-story balcony until, like, years after it happened?
I get it. You want to know how I, as a father, had never been told that story of my wife?
Yeah.
Okay, that is a great question, and I think that leads down an interesting line of discussion. Here's the line of discussion.
Okay.
And I think you can illustrate it with young parents who have a first child. This is a thing in our society and probably around the world. You know, you have parents, they have a first child, they watch it carefully, they make sure, like if the pacifier drops on the ground, they pick it up and sanitize it before they give it back to the child. They, carefully watch their diet, and then they have their second child and their attention is subdivided. Maybe if they drop the pacifier on the ground, they just look to make sure there's no hair sticking to it, wipe it off on their pants before they give it back to the kid.
I've done that.
Then when you have the third child and you transition from a man-to-man to a zone defense, and you drop the pacifier on the ground, you put the kid down and let them pick it up themselves. It just completely changes things. Well, when something happens to your sixth child, it just might not have risen above the noise threshold that even when I got home from work, she wouldn't be like, you never believe what happened today. Your 2-year-old was hanging off the balcony. Maybe there was just something else going on and it never came up.
I get it. The notable events threshold has been pushed so high by 6 children that it would only have been a notable event if they had actually fallen off of the balcony.
You got it. That's why I'd never heard the kid balcony hanging story.
That's outstanding. That puts a lot of things into cool perspective, though, because like you said, the first kid and the second kid thing, like I completely understand and have been there. My wife and I make fun of ourselves, our past selves, when we had our one kid. Like our favorite example is we had 2 diaper bags with us at all times. We had one like giant, like almost carry-on suitcase size one with like extras of everything. We called our mothership diaper bag that stayed in the car. And then we had the smaller diaper bag that just had 1 or 2 of the things that we needed that we would take with us inside of places.
I love it.
Yeah, and we make fun of ourselves because we had our second kid, and it's just ridiculous. Like now we walk out with like a diaper in a cargo pocket. Like, all right, we're good.
Yeah,
we'll be fine.
That's it. You don't need all that stuff.
Yeah, but I couldn't imagine though, like you said, and that was an excellent way to put it, is transitioning from a man to a zone defense. Like having more kids than you have adults would definitely alter the dynamic even further.
Yeah, you just gotta it just change your things. We might have gone to the emergency room that week. I don't just hey Ben, guess what? Your kid didn't fall off the balcony today. Like, okay, I got it.
Did you get like a punch card from the emergency room? Like every 10th stomach pump is free.
Oh man. Going to the emergency room in Italy was the worst because there was a language barrier. I usually had time to prepare. I'll put that on my list of stories to tell you in the future. But speaking of language barriers, that brings me to bad at English.
Oh, that was good. Very well done, sir.
So one time I was in a meeting in England, we were planning to go to a meeting, and I was trying to gather a coalition, and I was getting a couple other people I wanted to go with me, and someone had made kind of an assessment of what the other groups that would be represented in that meeting, how many they would bring. And there was kind of a calculation taking place of that they didn't want to bring too many from our group, disproportionate to the number that would be represented from the other groups.
Okay.
And they said, we wouldn't want to turn up mob-handed. And I was like, mob-handed? And I got out my notebook and I wrote it down, like, what does that mean, mob-handed? But I found out that this is a great term that we don't really have a substitute for in America that I needed previously in my life. So it's an adjective that means in a large group, especially in a large threatening group of people. So you could use it in terms of, like the mob turned up, the villagers turned up to the Frankenstein's mansion mob-handed, but you could also use it to say we wouldn't want to go to the meeting with 6 people because we wouldn't want to be mob-handed.
Okay, so it's just the idea that if you show up with a large party, that just the fact that you have so many people with you could be intimidating and alter the tone of the meeting?
Exactly.
Okay.
And it's versatile because you could also do it on purpose. Like you could say that they gathered enough police officers so as to turn up mob-handed, so that you would deliberately be intimidating.
That's that is interesting because I definitely remember stuff like that happening back, especially in my military career, like going to things deliberately or like either mob-handed or not mob-handed, but having that discussion and thought process beforehand. That is interesting.
Yeah, that was one of the great leadership fails of my first flight command, where I showed up to a meeting and I think I brought 4 people with me and everyone else had just come solo. And it just really showed that I had not properly evaluated the scenario.
I mean, that was only the first time, right? You didn't show up with 4 experts like every single meeting after that, did you?
Yes. But it was really embarrassing for me to have shown up, to have turned up mob-handed.
I remember being at a wing commanders meeting one time, and I had been brought there by our squadron commander just in case. It was a new wing commander, and so like every group commander called in all of their squadron commanders, and then all the squadron commanders had cherry-picked 2 or 3 people to come with them just in case they needed to pick somebody's brain on the spot.
Wow.
And the first thing, like this place was packed, right, to the rafters, standing room only, for this staff meeting for the new wing commander. And the first thing the wing commander did was he pointed at every single person in the room, starting with the lowest ranking, working his way up, and asked, why are you here? And then, like, after he was in, he's like, okay, if you're not a group commander or a squadron commander, get out. If these people don't know what you're doing, then they're not doing their jobs. And so, like,
wow.
all the lieutenants and stuff were like, all right, well, I got better things to do anyway. But you could see some of the group commanders kind of like loosening their collars, like, oh.
Yeah, and that's like I'm not going to be able to talk to whatever he's going to ask me about, and I'm sending my experts away.
It's like, I'm a group commander. I don't know anything. I just sit in my office and answer emails.
But that also shows that the leader understood what the purpose of his meeting was and what he wanted the audience to be. He didn't want to be weighed down by, the carefulness you have to use in speech when you have subordinates in the room.
Well, not only that, but like, are we really going to get to the level of detail where a group commander is going to look at a squadron commander, is going to go to look at a flight commander to answer a question? Like, that's ridiculous. They'd be there all day.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it helps if you're delving into a particularly technical area to have 1 or 2 SMEs in the room, but you don't need every single represented group to have their own subject matter experts.
Are you ever going to, like, at the wing commander level, are you ever going to get down in the weeds? Like, I feel like if you're the wing commander and you're getting in the weeds, then the people that are in charge of that thing are in trouble, or should be.
Okay. So it's my turn to stop you for a second and say that wing commander is a person who's responsible usually for an entire military base, somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000 to 5,000 people. So he is in charge of that entire mission, all those people. So what Josh is suggesting is that a person in charge of that many people doesn't have time to talk about individual tasks and people.
Oh no, you're talking about like a CEO of a company coming down and asking about the efficiency of this conveyor belt process.
Right. Just way too much detail for someone with that much responsibility.
Exactly. And if he is focused on that, then he's not doing his job appropriately.
Well, apparently he thought his group commanders had turned up to his wing meeting mob-handed.
Haha, bringing it back.
All right. So you and I had written down before something we'd wanted to talk about, what our focus is as parents when we develop our children. And I remember you telling me your philosophy on this, and I thought that you and Nicole had made an evaluation of what your strengths and weaknesses are, and then what you thought was important to teach your kids.
Yes, it is. So Nicole and I are very, very academic kind of people. I'm very technical, she's very fuzzy, and so we balance each other really well. She has her degree in history, I have my degree in computer science. So between the two of us, we've got like most of the academic subject covered, like well enough, especially for like elementary or high school level stuff. So we're not super worried about our kids with their academic education. Like if they have trouble or struggle, then we'll be able to help them with that. What we can't help them with is how to make friends or how to talk to people like other human beings do, because those are lessons that she and I just don't have.
Sure. So a lot of this probably just hasn't come up yet, I'm guessing, because they're still kind of young.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. When young kids like that, he's in the second grade now, there's still no barriers. Like it's interesting because we're starting to see the social I don't even know, like social, I'm going to call them social barriers for lack of a better term for now. But we're starting to see those cliques kind of develop. We're starting to see the kids starting to split up and like form like little packs like they do. Yeah, because like little kids are just the worst.
Has he come home like distressed about that?
One time, like a couple of weeks ago, he said that he was playing at recess with a couple of the girls in his class. And then a couple of the boys in his class came over and started giving him a hard time. Like saying like the stuff that second graders do. It's like, oh, you're playing with the girls. You're going to turn into a girl. Ha ha ha. And then he was more confused than anything. He's like, I'm not going to turn into a girl. I was just playing with my friends.
I understand how this works. What do I not know here?
Yeah, it's like I don't get it. Why is this a subject of ridicule? And so we're just trying to explain to him, like, oh, well, they shouldn't have done that. They were being kind of mean. You can do whatever you want. You can hang out with whoever you want. But that was the first indicator to me, like, oh, okay, they're starting to turn into the little pack hunting animals that I know they're going to be.
That's heartbreaking as a parent when you first see those experiences where you have your innocent little child, then you know maybe they're a bit naive, but you're kind of enjoying the fact that they aren't world weary and wise yet, and then they come back and they've learned their first few hard lessons because of rude kids, and you're just like, did we have to do this?
Right, and then like this makes it a tough decision. Not really a tough decision, I guess, but like there's never a good. There's no win-win in this scenario, right? Somebody's going to lose. Either you tell him like those guys were being wrong, and then you can play with and hang out with whoever you want, but then that just furthers kind of the divide because you want your kid to be a good kid, and then if you start to associate or identify like incorrect behavior or behavior that you don't agree with, then in the kid's mind that puts those people on the outside. And so, like, even just trying to reinforce what we want him to be as open-minded and accepting is going to cause him to be more secular and more closed off to other types of people.
I love this point that you're making because I think you could take that scenario you gave where the kid comes home and he's like, oh, you shouldn't hang out with girls. And how could you not only teach your kid to understand the tension that was being introduced, but also maybe how to not exclude the perpetrator in that scenario and try to influence him for good.
Oh, and that's the thing. Like anybody that has the ability to diffuse that situation and bring those two groups together is a natural born politician. And Nicole and I are not that. So I have no idea how I would have handled the situation. It would have been, I'd have been terrible at it. I'd have made them feel bad or somebody would have gotten hurt if I had been involved in that scenario, emotionally or physically or both. So
in what ways have you done this, focused on their social development as you've been raising them?
So a lot of, we ask him a lot about how his friends are, and we try to get him into group sport activities. Like we push him to try to do things in groups. Like right now he's doing karate. Well, it's Taekwondo, but we call it karate because it's easier to pronounce for the kids and people know what that means.
I bet there's someone out there that really cares about that wishes you wouldn't do that, but I am not one of them.
Yes, it's like, no, Taekwondo is totally different. Like we can have, I would encourage those people that they feel very strongly about it to go to our new subreddit, which I'm sure you'll talk about later.
Sure.
But like in that, they have a class within the Taekwondo like studio that we're at, where it's called leadership, and they put the kid into like deliberately uncomfortable situations. Like for example, my son was doing particularly well.
Wait, in a martial arts class?
In a martial arts class. So, it's a whole thing. It's like a big package deal. But one of the aspects of it is that they actively encourage the kids that are enrolled in their leadership kind of upsell package to do things like public speaking and instruction, and just to make them
This
a more
is Taekwondo, not Toastmasters.
This is Taekwondo, not Toastmasters, yes. So, for example, a couple weeks ago, my son was doing particularly well learning his weapon form. Like they have their kamas, they're like little hand sickles, one in each hand. And they go through a specific set of moves. And he was doing particularly well, and the teacher called him and was like, well, why don't you come up to the front and then walk the rest of the class through the first 6 steps of this form. And he is 8, and the people in the class were ages ranging from 6 to 20-something. And there was maybe 5 or 6 other people in the class, but the fact, and you could see he was really trepidatious about it and really quiet, but then the instructor was very good about encouraging him to speak up, speak clearly, go slowly.
Okay.
And it was just
kind of an underwriting ethic in the way you conduct yourself in this social situation.
Yeah, and not only that, but then putting him in a scenario where he is in front of people. Like, it might be an uncomfortable situation, but just in a controlled environment. Like, hey, we knew you were nervous, but you did a great job. Here's some things that you could do next time to be a little bit better. But that helps his social development, right? Just his confidence in himself and how he presents himself.
I love it. I think there should be less separation, though. It'd be like, he's up there and somebody makes him uncomfortable and then he punches him in the mouth, and it's all good because you're in a martial arts class.
So that might be the old school martial arts classes, or maybe at the Cobra Kai dojo. But this is kind of low level kid stuff. So I mean, they do have legitimate belts and they go to tournaments and things, but it's not that combative.
So my daughters this year participated in a program they call Girls on the Run. And it's this regional thing. It's some kind of franchise. I don't know what it is. But in the St. Louis region, basically, it culminates in all of the girls from the region going downtown and doing a run. You probably saw some photos of me wearing a tutu on social media, running with my daughters through the streets of St. Louis. And they just meet after school a couple of days a week. And while the culminating event is the 5K, it's almost like that's a secondary objective. It's kind of this empowering, girls get together and say encouraging things to each other kind of thing. And It's fun. My 5th child has done it 2 years in a row, and my 6th did it last year. I imagine they'll both want to do it again this year. I like it. I like what it does for them.
That's interesting. And that goes down a whole nother avenue of, I'm not there yet with my daughter, but just being a woman in today's modern society and the things that are and are not acceptable and just expectations for the world. That seems tricky. Do you think that they've benefited from this, the Speak Out run that they've done? Beyond just the group gathering and the fun activities of it?
I'll say that there hasn't been anything that's happened in their life where I kind of raised my eyebrow and thought, did that come from Girls on the Run?
Okay. So maybe
one way or the other, positively or negatively, I just haven't seen any kind of impact. I feel like that's the only influence in their life that's presenting that stimuli.
Well, and that's the thing about this, the social development stuff, because you're not going to get those peaks in performance that are noticeable outside of the everyday, just what they do in their behavior. It's a much longer game, and you have to really analyze and scrutinize what they're doing and what they're saying and how they're holding themselves, and to just try to gauge and figure out where they're at, because you're not going to get those big catalyzing events that tell you, oh yeah, he's fine.
Right. Yeah, sometimes those come along completely involuntarily. Alicia and I were talking about this the other day, about how just last weekend she'd gone out of town. She went on a field trip with some of her college friends to go visit Gallaudet University, which is one of the oldest universities for deaf and hard of hearing, and it's in Washington, D.C. So she'd been out of town for 5 days, and anytime she goes out of town, which is very rare, she's worried that I'm not going to do all the things that she does when she's here.
like the emotional stuff, or just the chores?
The chore. Getting the kids out of the door to go to school in the morning and making sure that they don't leave the door to the house open or forget their homework.
You see, my wife does that too. Like if she's going to leave and she doesn't have the time to get my daughter ready, she's always worried that I'm going to like, I don't know, put her in a sackcloth and just like kick her out the door.
I get it. We're chuckling like our wives think we're, just going to screw up something that's otherwise very simple. But the stuff she worries about is very specific because she knows there are things that I don't care about as much as she does.
Yeah, I have no idea how to do my daughter's hair, and I don't care. Like my daughter rolls out of bed, like, hey,
that's
fix
a
your
great
hair.
example.
Yeah, fix your hair, kid.
So what? So what if she goes to school with like messy hair one day? Like big deal.
No, nobody cares.
Right. So that was kind of the tension that was going on, and what had come up was the fact that when she's gone, they get a chance to. We can see, how long has it been since you've actually stepped back and let them try for themselves to do this thing? Maybe they can do it, and you only think they need you because they never get a chance.
That is interesting because those events do happen in our household too, but usually it's due to my laziness. It's like, oh, go give your daughter a shower, and then I'm like walking over there. I'm like, can you do this by yourself? And she like puffs up like the little chicken. Yeah, I can do this. Like, all right, do it. Show me. And then when she fails miserably, then okay, we'll try again in a couple weeks.
Or sometimes something comes up. Maybe you thought they weren't ready, and wow, they actually can do it. They can do the things.
Exactly, and you won't know until you push them out of the nest.
Right. So it's interesting how I think our goals look the same on the surface, but ours kind of come from a different place than yours because our priorities for deciding how we raise our children are very much derived from our religious background and the theology that we believe in.
You got very quiet there. Are you worried that we're not going to have a good conversation about the theology aspect of your?
No. So raising our foundation for raising our children is derived from our faith in Christ. Okay. And believing that we want them to grow up and become like him. And so we teach them about him and we try to model his characteristics, and a lot of the priorities that we set in our life come from that aspect of our background and belief system. But I don't think that necessarily leads to a different conclusion than you guys do, where you're also trying to teach your children to just be productive members of society and learn to get along with people.
Well, exactly. I think we have no differences here. I think we both agree on the end state. Just the analogies I think we make along the way are different. I still want my kids to have a firm moral, understanding of what's right and what's wrong. I just think that where we derive our moral values from is different. That's all. And there's nothing wrong with that. I loved that was the perfect pregnant pause for us for Ben to come back like, well, okay, Josh, you can go ahead and keep thinking that.
No, it wasn't that at all. We've already spent a lot of time on this podcast talking about my unified parenting theory, right. About how I believe that I'm trying to teach my children to first learn to obey me and then to learn to be committed to our common goals and then to learn to act independently towards those goals and then eventually come up with goals of their own. And then underlying all of that is, what are the goals? Where are they coming from? Because they aren't so. But if they're both focused on being deciding that you're going to try to do something utilitarian to have a successful life and be a productive member of society, or deciding that you want to please an omnipotent God who has given you commandments and rules for having a happy life, a lot of times lead to the same end, but underneath the engine are kind of different.
No, I completely get that. From the outside, you can make simple comparisons, but yeah, the driving factor is totally different, and I understand that.
And I think I've reached my Forrest Gump place on that topic.
Well, no, there is more to explore there. Like, for example, I read a great book about how they put forth this hypothesis that religion and society, like civilization, human civilization, when we came out of the hunter-gatherer stage and started forming villages and agricultural societies, like religion provided a moral underpinning for some of the rules that make civilization possible, and so they kind of had this symbiotic relationship and evolved together. So that's something we can talk about, obviously not right now. We can talk about that some other time.
Yeah, I'll put that in the hopper. I'd love to get deep into that. I also like to probably spend a little bit of time reading up on it before we talk about it.
Excellent. Now, I want to make a huge departure for this podcast, and I want to propose the next subject of conversation. Is that okay?
Sure, go for it.
This is, we're way out there now because I'm not the one driving this. But the one thing that we've been talking about a lot offline was is what's currently going on in with a couple of things in Magic the Gathering. And I know we don't want to get too esoteric and too in the weeds with it, but I think the situation is in itself interesting enough to have a short discussion about.
Sure. So what do you want to talk?
Okay, so it's a little bit of background for our listeners that may or may not play Magic the Gathering. There was a new set released. So there's a new set of cards that the manufacturer put out into the world and said, these are now legal to play in tournaments and games and whatever. And one of those cards ran away as being very, very good. Like in the game, like if you're playing the game, this card is very, very good. And it's just very strong to the point where a lot of the big tournaments, they all post the different decks that people play at these tournaments. And it's starting, the percentage that this card is appearing in those decks is increasing to a point where it's unhealthy. To the point where either you're playing this card in your deck or you are altering your deck to combat that card. I think the last Mythic Championship it was something like 60% of the decks in the tournament had this card. I guess
You're talking about Oko?
I'm talking about Oko, Thief of Crowns.
Okay.
And that's the name of the card. And
so Oko Thief of Crowns had so much gravity, probably more than Wizards of the Coast anticipated, that it's warped the entire world around itself.
Right, and that's a problem. And in the past, they've done things to correct these problems. But it worked. All right, so what I wanted to talk about, though, is the fact because this card is so good, and because you can't buy specific cards from the manufacturer, you can only buy booster packs that have 15 random cards in it, and that this card is very rare to get, that the price of it has skyrocketed. I think right now, the last time I looked, Oko Thief of Crowns was worth $60 a card. 60.
I'm looking it up.
I can hear the keyboard thrumming.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so it's $60.
Let's see. I'm seeing used for 40.
Used for 40? Wow.
Yeah, and there's like four different printings of it. There's like the standard one, then there's the expanded borders one, then there's the foil standard one, and then the foil expanded borders one. That one goes for $220.
Wow. Well, I'm just thinking about the baseline standard art, standard normal one, because that's where that's going to be the most common printing of it.
Yeah. So that one right now you can get on tcgplayer.com for $31.
tcgplayer.com. Please send us money. No, but yeah. What I wanted to talk to you about is because it is a very expensive card, and you actually purchased. Like I don't play in paper anymore, so I haven't bought any cards in a long, long time. But you actually purchased a couple copies of that card. Yeah.
So as you and I talked about before, when I'm trying to be able to keep this something that I go and do with my kids on Friday nights, I try to build 4 or 5 competitive decks so that we have ones we can just pull out and go play. And so I was down at the game store to get something else, and they had a couple of these under the glass, and they were going for $35 a piece. And I knew this was a couple of weeks ago, and the format was already starting to warp like this. And I knew that probably wasn't going to go away. Like I saw that the value could only go up, even though that seems like a lot to pay for them. So I purchased a couple, and I've had them now for 3-4 weeks.
Okay, and like I said, I've seen them on different sites for up to $60. So this card is still in high demand, and it's still, it's only increasing in value, if anything. What is interesting, though, in the conversation that we've been having is I have seen some things come out from the manufacturer saying that, they didn't realize that this card was going to be as good as it was, and that they've acknowledged that what they call the metagame, which is, the state of the decks that people are playing, is becoming a little warped around this card, and that makes it unhealthy. From the manufacturer's perspective, it's better if the game is more accessible to new players, because they always want people to come in and play the game. They don't want people to quit the game because they don't have the cards and they can't get the cards or it's too expensive.
Yeah,
so,
there's a huge opportunity cost equation here that's happening for them, where they can either, if this is a mythic rare that people are buying lots of product to get and it has a high value on the secondary market, then people are very invested in it. And there's a huge cost that if they were to ban this card or restrict its usage, then that would really anger those people and potentially scare them away. But if it becomes too format warping and everything changes because of it, and then people are scared away for a different reason, because they, it's play this card or nothing, and it's expensive and hard to get, and everything changes because of it.
Right, and so this is the situation we find ourselves is you have a card that you bought for $35 that you could realistically probably sell for $50. So you could make a net profit on this card. And there are rumblings and rumors that because this card is so warping, that the manufacturer might ban it. They might say, okay, this card is printed, but it's no longer legal to play in the game. And if that happens, inevitably the price is going to drop to almost nothing.
You are absolutely right. So we're at a situation right now where I hold something that I got for $35. It probably has a real world value of $50, but the market is showing the potential to crash. That if they do ban this card, it could go to sub $10, and I've lost a significant amount over what I initially paid for it.
Exactly. And so then the conversations you and I have been having is, well, what do you do? Do you sit on it and just hope for the best, or do you there's a lot of different ways this whole scenario could shake out, but what do you do?
So what would you do?
What would I do? So I'd probably wait another week or two and then sell it. Wizards has they release every 6 weeks or something. They come out with the announcements of what cards are going to ban or restrict.
Yeah. So there's a known cycle for when they're going to do this, and people anticipate it. If the rumblings are that this card's going to get banned, the market will start to crash before the banning announcement is made.
And I get that if there's more information or more indicators that it is going to crash, which then gives you an opportunity to go one of two ways. Because then if you feel like the market is starting to go down right before the restriction announcement, then you have the opportunity to possibly speculate. You could buy up a bunch of them as the price drops and then sit on them and hope it doesn't get banned, and then sell them for what will inevitably be the $60 price after it doesn't get banned.
Yeah, that's a possibility.
Or you could sell it in advance of that and get your money's value out of them. You made the money from it. And honestly, if it was me and I had these cards, I would probably sell them for the cash. And the reason for that is, while it is a very powerful card, it is easily answerable in the game. There are other cards that just take that card out of the equation. And they're much, much cheaper. So I would sell these two cards to get my monetary value out of them. And honestly, I would make my decks to either knowing that card was going to be played against me a lot, or just a deck that is the rock to their scissors.
I got it. So you just don't value very highly the possessing it for its inherent power.
Not when we start talking about that much money. You could potentially make $30 profit from selling these two cards, and if you got $100 for those two cards, you could put together a decent competitive complete deck for what you sold two cards for. To me, it's the value that I get out of the game is not about having the most powerful cards, but it's just having fun being able to play.
Yeah, and if those were the only criteria I was making that decision by, I guess then I would do that. But there's other criteria as well, and they have nothing to do with the game. Selling cards online is kind of problematic. I can't just hold them out in the air and wave them and somebody appears out of thin air with $50 cash and hands it to me. There's some risk involved as far as finding a buyer and then making the transaction and then doing the shipping and all of that completing successfully, and it's just a lot of overhead that I prefer to stay away from.
You could easily, one of two things, you could either sell that on Craigslist in less than 24 hours in your local area, or two, you go to a game shop with people that want this card. You could do a cash under the table. Usually the host of the tournaments frowns on people selling the product that they are selling in their store. But there's no reason you couldn't find a buyer.
I could probably go back to my game store because I know they give reasonable rate of store credit, and just trade it back in for more than I bought it from them for.
So there you go. So you have the opportunity and the ability to transform these cards back into value that you could use.
Yeah.
So what are some of the other considerations?
Well, so I look at this like an investment strategy. This is, and I think this is what makes this accessible to our non-Magic player listeners. This is very similar to any other type of speculative investment, regardless of the fact that we're talking about a trading card game.
Right.
This could be real estate. It could be the stock market. It could be bonds. It could be anything.
Which is part of the reason I wanted to bring it up, because it is so equatable to different things.
Yeah, you have a market, you have forces that influence the value of things in the market, you have speculation that's occurring, you have events that you can anticipate that might cause the value to change. Now, in investment strategies, there is an investment strategy called buy and hold. And if you look at something like investing in the stock market on a very short-term basis, the stock market's very volatile. And if you were buying and selling all the time, you have the potential to gain a lot or also lose a lot of money. But over time, the stock market trends upward at a pretty healthy rate. And if all you do is buy and never sell, then you're basically, as long as you're diverse enough in what you're acquiring, you're basically guaranteed to capitalize on that increased value over time. And that pretty well describes the way I collect Magic the Gathering cards.
Well, that's true if you ever sell them. Have you ever sold your Magic the Gathering cards?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, then, statement withdrawn, sir.
Okay.
Well, what's interesting about this is I can pull up an example because as we've been with this whole situation with that card, I've been looking into I've been just watching YouTube videos and reading articles about the speculative and the investment nature of the game. And there was one thing I came across that just floored me. And so back when I started playing in 2005, the set that I started with was Ravnica, the original Ravnica when it first came out, right? And there was a card printed in that set that I really liked, but it didn't see much play. It was called Doubling Season.
Oh, yeah.
And
that's a great example.
It is a great example because it was, at the time when I was playing it, it was first printed, it was a bulk rare, meaning it was worth like maybe $1. And like everybody had them, nobody wanted them, everybody wanted to trade them away, no big deal. Well, flash forward now, 2019, and I just saw a video where Doubling Season has become a staple in certain decks in a certain format, but Wizards has not reprinted it enough. So now they go for, it's like $50 or $60 for one of those cards. When at the time that I bought it, it was worth almost nothing.
Yeah, they cost $55
that's your buy and hold
now.
strategy paying off right there.
Yeah, so if you'd had a play set of Doubling Season sitting in your collection for 10 years, all of a sudden it's worth 50 times what you paid for it.
Which is crazy. It makes me so mad because I had a whole bunch of cards that I think we just threw away the last time we moved.
Yeah, and I watched a video last night. Somebody made one of those, you see it pop up from time to time on the internet where they show bars and then they show things changing over time, like what was the #1 video on YouTube over time or what was the most popular website on the internet over time. Well, this was for the 10 original dual lands, revised dual lands, and what their value has done over time. Yeah. And they hovered for maybe their first 15 years under $100, and in like the last 2 years, they've gone up to almost $800.
I believe that, but we could go down a rabbit hole on why we think that. Like I can tell you right now, it's because they reprinted the fetch lands. But that's getting too into the esoterics of the game that we were trying to avoid.
But back to kind of just the broad scale investing things. I think what you're suggesting with my Oko Thief of Crowns to just sell them right now would probably cement my gains in the market and gain a significant profit, or I could just hang on to them. And I don't see a very significant risk that over time that his value won't maintain, even if he does get banned. Like, let's say that happens, because I sent you an example of another card that did happen to. Mm-hmm. Even if he gets banned and the value crashes, I think it will eventually go back up to current levels or higher.
Right, and that's because of the format nature of the game. Is because it gets banned in one format doesn't mean that it's banned in all formats. It can still be played in other tournaments and other styles. It's just the most is Standard still the most popular format?
I don't know if that's true. I don't know how they even came up with that saying in the first place.
Huh. Yeah, I feel like Standard's the most popular, but that's only because I'm not very exposed to the larger metagame or the larger tournament scene. So I could be completely wrong there. But if he's banned in Standard, that doesn't mean he's banned in other formats. And he is actually starting to show up in other formats and performing really well as there too.
Yeah, imagine that. An aggressively costed Planeswalker that comes out and only does good things and has 6 loyalty for 3 mana is good.
Esoterics of the game. So what Ben was saying is it's very, very good.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm going to hang on to my Okos. I don't think I'll be selling them.
All right. Well, we'll have to revisit depending on what Wizards decides to do with it and how it destroys or alters the format.
Okay. So just last week was Halloween. And you and I dressed up our families in costumes and stuff like that. I guess we can show those or talk about those if you think that's worth a discussion. I don't really have a lot to say about it. It felt like a usual year for us, although you did some awesome stuff in your crafting and wood carving and sewing and all that kind of stuff.
Well, thank you for that. We do appreciate it. Nicole and I put in way too much work this year for our costumes that were all homemade and like had big fancy props, but it paid off. Like we put a lot of hours of work into it, but we think they turned out really well. The only thing I do want to discuss about Halloween was that we had kind of a side bet going because of the costumes that we chose or that our kids chose to wear.
Oh, yes. Okay, yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, so we were talking about that like before Halloween, like what the kids were gonna do, and what we're gonna dress up as, and our family, at least, we have done group costumes every year. So like the four of us will wear like a themed set. So like one year, Jane was Darth Vader, and then my son, my wife, and I were all stormtroopers.
I love that you picked the baby to be Darth Vader.
It was adorable and awesome, and we walked around like we were escorting her around, like pushing people out of her way. It was great.
That does sound great.
There was one year where she was a princess, and then my son and I were knights, and then my wife was like a ranger, so it was very medieval themed.
Nice.
Before Jane was born, there was a year where I was the man in the big yellow hat, and my son was just a monkey. And so that was a funny year because like people would see him trick-or-treating, like, oh, what are you supposed to be? It's like, oh, I'm a monkey. And they'd be like, oh, well, he's a monkey. And then they'd see me around the corner like, all right, kid. Like, oh, and then I get it. It's the man in the big yellow hat. It's a Curious George thing. But anyway, I don't know why I went down this tangent. I lost my train of thought. But go ahead.
So this year, our kids are starting to get older, and my older teenagers have stopped dressing up. And so this year we just had the youngest three do costumes. And Alicia always takes the entire month of October and just sews and crafts and does awesome things. And my kids have been watching a bunch of cartoons on Netflix or whatever, and they wanted to dress up as their favorite cartoon characters. So my 13-year-old and my 11-year-old dressed up as Dipper and Mabel Pines from Gravity Falls. And then my 9-year-old dressed up as Star Butterfly from Star versus the Forces of Evil.
Wow. And those, yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
So those are, known amongst 9-year-olds and 11-year-olds out there. But I think what you and I were wagering on is, when they knock on the door and some granny answers the door, is she going to go, oh, nice Star Butterfly costume, or aren't you a cute princess?
Right. And that feeds into, like, this year, we were, like, all four of my family, we were characters from an anime show called Bleach, which is, like, really obscure. Not very many people.
It's about laundry.
It is definitely not about laundry. It's kind of a fighting samurai-esque anime. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole of different genres of anime.
Does Jane like this anime?
So our kids have seen like 2 episodes of it, and my wife and I have wanted to dress up like Bleach characters for Halloween for years.
But how do you get your young kids to agree to a costume of something that they don't even watch?
Oh, easy. We turned on 1 episode of it, and we said, all right, you can be this guy with this giant sword to my son, and he was on board. And then we showed a different episode.
Giant sword, I'm in.
Exactly. And we showed a different episode to my daughter, and it's like, oh, you can be this little girl with the pink hair. I get pink hair, I'm in. And so that's how we sold them on it.
Then your kids, then you capitalize on the fact that they're easy to please, and you know what their joy buttons are.
Right, and the reason we came up with this is because, like, in past years, the kids had an idea, and that we just kind of elaborated and expounded on. This year, they were all over the place. They didn't know what they wanted to be, so we took the decision out of their hands.
Okay, so you guys dressed up in costumes. I'll put it in the show notes so that everyone can see because they were awesome. Your woodworking was fantastic, and I loved the theme and stuff, even though I had no idea what Bleach is. And then I decided I need to dress up since I was taking the kids out, and I want to do something I thought would be fun and also easy to do. So I put together a few things. I got some Crocs and some pajama pants and dressed up as Fat Thor from Endgame.
Which was awesome. Like, you look great in yours. You got to put a picture of both your kids and then your costume as well, because you rocked it.
Okay, yeah, and it turned out pretty good. I definitely got recognized more than anyone. But carrying Mjolnir definitely helps.
Oh, definitely. People get that. The Mjolnir and the beard, people get it.
I stuffed a pillow inside of my shirt.
I was hoping, because either you stuffed a pillow in your shirt, or we're going to transition really well into our fitness.
Yes,
talk
and that's what I want to talk about next. That's where I was going with all this. But what you and I had wagered on is who was going to be recognized the most.
Right, because your kids, like you said, like there's a population of people that understand and recognize what Gravity Falls is, and there's a population of people that recognize and know what Bleach is. But those are small populations, and so we both kind of thought that ours was going to be the most obscure.
Yeah, so, I think you probably won that one pretty well.
Oh, I wanted to ask, how many times did your kids
I would say a solid 10% of the time people really recognized my kids, their costumes.
Oh, that's actually really good. Like, I didn't realize Gravity Falls was so out there.
Yeah, I mean, they weren't just like, oh, Gravity Falls. They're like, hey, you're Dipper and you're Mabel, which also shows how awesome my wife's costumes were.
Definitely. Like, they're immediately identifiable. Now, we were identified one time throughout all of Halloween, and we went trick-or-treating twice. We had trick-or-treating on Halloween night, and then Friday, November 1st, we went to a trunk-or-treat with 30 or 40 people, and that was when one person recognized who we were. Because the guy kind of on the sly, again, one of those secret nerd handshakes, I was holding my son's sword at the time, but the character I was dressed as doesn't use that sword. And the guy came up and like under his breath kind of
corrected you?
Yeah, he's like, you're holding the wrong sword.
I had the same experience as Fat Thor because I was holding Mjolnir and the guy was like, you really should have Stormbreaker.
Nice. That's pretty good.
And like my daughter that was Star Butterfly from Star vs. the Forces of Evil, I mean, my wife rocked it with this costume. I mean, she has like these boots that look like shark rhinoceroses, and she has this little star purse and this wand with wings and devil horns and long blonde hair, and she just nailed all of it.
Now, I've told you this multiple times. Your wife rocks every costume that she makes to the point where she needs to not restrict herself to Halloween. She really needs to like make costumes and like come with us to tournaments and like cosplay.
It's a full-blown crisis in my house, though, Josh. I mean, the entire month of October, like, she gets nothing else done. Her craft area turns into like a tornado zone, and then just like I do the laundry and the cooking and the cleaning and everything, and she's just like, don't touch me, I'm over here making costumes. And so I'm kind of glad we constrain that to just 1 month out of the year.
Ben, that is a time budgeting and a slack issue that I am surprised you haven't identified.
Yeah, I don't know how to fix that problem, but I love it when she does it.
Yeah, well, I encourage her. She should be doing it more.
I know. Well, she's listening, and she'll take that feedback.
I
think she also likes constraining to just 1 month out of the year.
Fair enough. I have told you this. I don't know if you've told your wife this, but I'm going to say, I'm talking directly to Alicia now, Ben. You just be quiet. Alicia, if you decide that you want to make a costume and dress up as one of the Magic of the Gathering characters and come with me and Ben to the next big tournament, I will absolutely be standing right next to you, head to foot, also in cosplay.
Oh, man. That would be too much peer pressure for me because I do not want to do that.
Well, if me and Alicia did it, then you would just have to. That's what peer pressure is. I get that. But, there's just no choice there.
So, I don't know what your house is like, but mine right now is full of candy.
I wouldn't say full of candy. Like, it was really nice going to the trunk or treat after Halloween because we got rid of all the candy we didn't want.
Oh, really? You just put it back in and gave it out to the kids that came around?
Well, we filtered what our kids went to bed on Halloween night. My wife and I spent a couple minutes going through the candy that they acquired. I'm like, okay, this is good. This is crap. Let's put this back in the bowl for tomorrow.
Awesome. And then you gave away like the peanut butter taffy and the orange and black wrappers?
Yeah, you gave away all the candy that you'd never hear about except during Halloween and kept all the name brand stuff.
Why do people give that stuff out?
Because it's cheap and because the candy companies, they know. You ever see those big, bulk, cheap candy give out bags that you get at like Walmart that are $10 and they're enormous? And it's like, oh, this has Snickers, Twix, and wait, what is this? Mounds? And wait, what are gumdrops? What is this? So you get like 2 or 3 good candies and then like 2 or 3 garbage candies.
Yeah, I guess you're right. And they put all the good ones up front and then it's like mostly the bad ones.
And then there's inevitably going to be people that go to Walmart the day of Halloween on their way home from work, like, oh, I forgot to get candy. And then they're stuck with whatever Willy Wonka stuff is at the bottom of the shelf.
So I have been eating too much candy because it's around. And they're eating it and sitting there like, ooh, Snickers. And I have happened... Okay, So I'd written down that I wanted to talk to you about fitness and weight loss. And I know that you and I used to come from a very common place in that we were both still active duty in the United States Air Force and had to meet the same standards. Although I think they are unfairly skewed against you rather than me because of the fact that you're just tall and bigger than me, and that has a pretty negative effect on all these things.
And that gets into the biggest thing I took issue with was the waist measurement. It's like, well, like we're going to measure your waist, and I would always get like a minimum passing score because I'm just big. I'm just a big guy. I wasn't fat at the time. I'm a little fatter now. But it's like, dude, I have a 36-inch waist. I've had a 36-inch waist my whole life. How am I scoring barely passing on this?
Yeah, exactly. Not fair to you. So what I want to come away from this discussion we're about to have from is I want to set some goals and come up with a plan to reach them because I'm not satisfied with where I'm at right now. And I'll tell you why.
This is an actual, like, you're engaging me to help you get in better shape.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And I have a great deal of faith in you in this because of experiences you and I have had together in the past. Not necessarily in the context of the Air Force physical fitness test, but like times I've gone with you to the gym and you've given me like coaching and stuff like that. You just come from a place where you give very good advice that's easy to follow and easy to remember. And I still find myself in the gym like remembering things you've said to me in those very few times you and I have worked out together.
Wow, that's flattering and terrifying because I have no idea what I told you.
I bet you do. I bet if you were to say right now, what is like the number one piece of advice I give to someone I was working out with the gym, it was probably that.
Just go. Just get there.
Definitely a good place to start. I was thinking more along the lines of the importance of having good form.
Oh, yeah, well, if I told you that, then good on past Josh.
Yay, past Josh. So one of the things I want to talk about first is just kind of talk about where I'm at. So, and I'm going to be overly vulnerable here. You know, I reached 5'9" when I was like 16 years old and haven't grown an inch since. And so, you know, I guess that's roughly average size, but I buy large size clothing and 32-inch, 34-inch waist-ish pants my whole life. And I've mostly just been, like, you could probably go in my drawer and find something from when I was 18 still.
Wow, okay.
Like, I just haven't changed that much. But as I've gotten older, my metabolism is starting to slow down, and I've started to have the actual problems. Like, I went somewhere with my wife on Friday, and I had to change clothes into some pants I hadn't worn in a while, and I couldn't fasten them. Yeah,
that's one of those catalyzing moments I talk about.
It is. That's exactly what it is. It's a catalyzing moment. So I've had a few of those. You know, I step on the scale when I'm approaching 200 pounds, and I've never been over 200 pounds. You know, I've got my 34-inch waist pants, which are starting to get snug, and my 32-inch waist pants I can't even get into anymore. I got shirts that I'd never even noticed that they were tight around the torso that are now starting to feel tight around the torso.
Sure.
I've been getting comments from people like I sent a photo to a friend of me at an event, and they're like, "Is that you?" I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "When was that?" I'm like, "Last week." They're like, "Oh, sorry."
You're being very nice about this, but Ben is talking about he sent me a photo, and like this exact scenario played out. Like, I did this to you, and I apologize for it because I totally put my foot in my mouth. Like, "Oh, this is you from like, you know, years and years ago, right?" He's like, "No, that was last week." I'm like, "Oh, sorry."
Yeah, so here's the worst one, though. That wasn't the worst of them all. So I'd come back from trick-or-treating, and I was still in the Fat Thor costume.
Oh,
and
no.
I'd taken the pillow out of my stomach, and I went and leaned over my wife, who was on the couch, and she reached over, and she's like, "Oh, you put the pillow back in." And she tapped on my stomach, and then she got this mortified look on her face.
Oh, she wasn't doing it facetiously. Oh.
No, that's real stomach. I'm Fat Thor, IRL.
That sucks. That hurts.
So,
right straight to your pride.
Everything's giving me the notice. You know, my scale, my clothes, my wife.
That's
my
the universe telling you, sir.
Yeah, and it's only a matter of time until I reach June when I take my annual physical fitness exam, and an airman with a tape measure measures my waist and also tells me the same thing. But I'm not going to get to that point because that has a lot larger ramifications and some momentary embarrassment.
Right.
So when in the past, when I've reached this threshold, and I've reached it, I'd say 3 times, where I'm just starting to get uncomfortable in my clothes, and the scale give me the message. Uncoincidentally, also, it's been about the right time in my career where I end up going on a deployment.
Which is perfect.
Yeah, Yeah, because what the deployment gives you is a whole bunch of slack.
Yes.
In the context of what we were talking about with scarcity. When you are on a deployment, you have a very easy way to control your diet and be able to do a great deal of physical exercise without any ramifications or trade-offs.
Yeah. The U.S. military does a great job of providing mostly healthy food. There are some unhealthy options, but like 99% of what is even available to eat is decently good for you, one. And then two, I remember when I was deployed, like you're talking about with the slack, like nowadays, like I can barely get to the gym. Like it's a struggle to make the time in my life to go to the gym. But when I was deployed, I was in the gym for 2 hours every single day.
Yeah, and there's nothing keeping you from it. There's no wife tapping her toe. There's no other commitments calling your name. It's like you got nothing better to do. It's there. It's a good gym. Make it happen.
So even if it's not a good gym, I mean, you can still make it happen. But yeah, I completely agree. It's the time slack. So is this your plan? You're just going to ask for a deployment?
No, I can't. I'm just there's not one coming up, and I'm going to have to face the fact that I need to take this problem on without the slack that comes from being deployed.
Yes, that's a true statement.
And I'm really stressed about it because I've been very, very successful on my deployments. Like I won a Biggest Loser contest twice.
Wow.
I'll go and I'll lose 30 pounds.
I mean, that speaks to both your dedication and to how much you weighed when you first went deployed.
Yeah, definitely that. But also just, I really can tear it up when I have that slack. When you give me that slack, I can just really get focused.
Oh, really?
And you mentioned that they have...
Yeah, I mean, like I could totally get this done if I had 6 more hours in the day, or I could totally afford that if I had $2,000 more in income a month. Yeah,
like,
of course
I could totally lose 30 pounds if I have the amount of control and discipline and focus and extra time that comes from being deployed. So but you said, they mostly have healthy meal options, but also I've seen people who deploy and they choose not to spend their time on that. And if you think about it another way, when you go to the chow hall, every single meal is an all-you-can-eat buffet.
Also true.
Every single meal. And maybe for someone back home that gets deployed and doesn't have any commitment or goals or discipline, they'll go out and gain 30 pounds instead of losing 30 pounds. Oof. And I've seen that happen.
Yeah, because you don't have to do a physical fitness test while you're deployed.
Right. But for me, I always kind of have simmering this goal of being more fit. And so being deployed just gives me that option to really focus on that without all the distractions. So the problem I'm having, and the problem in the context of our discussion on scarcity, is how do you synthesize that urgency without the slack? Like, how do you focus your resources? How do you prioritize and those kinds of things? And I'll tell you what trips me up. One, I just feel a tremendous amount of pressure to be at the places, to be at work and to be at home, and working out takes me away. And you also, I'm sure you've heard it said that you get toned in the gym and you lose weight
that you eat mindlessly throughout the day. Like I had the same thing happen to me earlier this year, like very early, back in January or February. I hit a weight threshold because I transitioned from a pool guy to outside in the heat, working physically all day, every day, to
being an accountant.
I'm being an accountant where I'm sitting at this desk and I get 300 steps all day at work.
Oh, no. You don't just get a free 600 calorie discount every day.
Oh, no. Yeah, exactly. So, but I was still eating the way that I did when I was a pool guy, going out, getting fast food and whatever every day. And so I hit you're talking about the different catalyzing events and the thresholds. There is a number that I hit on the scale that when I hit that number, I know, like, it doesn't matter what I look like in the mirror. I need to lose weight now.
Right.
So I hit that number, and then Nicole helped me get on this. Like, we counted calories for a while to try to analyze our diet, and then identified the worst things that we were eating, try to cut back on those. And it's always an uphill battle. It's a constant struggle to be good. But
have you backed off from the number of alarm?
Oh, I have. Since then, I've lost 10 to 12 pounds. So I'm back down to like 250, 248, depending on the day. My goal is to get back down to 240.
Nice.
I need to make some other changes to get there, but that's outside what we're talking about.
When I came back off my last extended stint away from home, it was 10 weeks. I was down to 165. I ran a 2-hour marathon. I aced my fitness test. I mean, it was really good, and I'm in a bad place now. So I want to try to follow a pattern. And the first thing you said there was the first thing you did was just kind of do an analysis of your habits.
Yes. So the first thing I would tell you to do is get one of those calorie journal apps where you just record and see the things that you eat throughout the day, and just eat normally for 2 or 3 days, and it'll help you identify like, oh, okay, well, this is my calorie budget. I should be here, and I'm eating like this much, and then you can start making the cuts that you need.
Okay.
Like I before I was drinking probably 2 or 3 Dr. Peppers a day, and I realized that was just totally obliterating my calorie budget. So I've really cut back on soda. Eating out, I stopped eating out since I don't burn the calories to justify it anymore. So I get those healthy microwave meals. But for a while I was eating those like bagged salads you get at the grocery store, but they're not very filling and they weren't very good. So I found some decently healthy microwave meals that I take to work with me 4 days a week. I do reward myself every Friday with pizza because you just have to have that in your life or you'll be sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the principles that you're laying down here. I mean, as far as like just making trade-offs and not deciding that what you have to do is something that makes you miserable or that you don't like, that you can do these kinds of things. What have you done as far as your workout regimen?
So before I was doing pretty good because the work hours allowed me to I could get up really early and I could go to the gym before I had to leave to get ready for work. So I could get a good hour to 45 minutes, a run or a workout in a gym every day, which was really successful and helped me quite a bit. I have since been put on a different schedule, so unless I want to get up at 3:30 in the morning, I'm just not going to be able to do that anymore.
What time did they got you coming in?
Well, I've got a commute that I've got to do, and then I have to get up and get the kids to school. So like, there's all the other administrative things keeps backing off, right? I've got to be to work at this time, which means I have to leave the house by this time, which means I have to drop the kids off at school at this time, which means I have to be done with everything by this time. It keeps backing off, and it's too much. So I'm transitioning and I'm doing my running and everything in the afternoon, but I haven't been able to work getting to the gym back into my schedule, which is where I'm struggling now. So I'm doing my running and I'm running really well, but I haven't been able to work out yet. And I'm still working on how I'm going to fit that into my schedule with all the stuff that goes on, after work with the kids doing their school things. And I'm looking into different options and we'll see what I land on.
And I like that this is a cultural thing in your family. Like I know your brother works out and your dad works out, and then you guys go do things like a Tough Mudder together.
So we don't do the Tough Mudder together anymore, which is sad because I'm the last person that has survived. Actually, no, that's not true either. Because everybody got hurt at the Tough Mudder. My dad broke his back doing a Tough Mudder. Didn't realize it. Like we were jumping over big trenches that they had dug. You're supposed to jump down into the trench and then climb out the other side, but we're all very tall, so we were just jumping over the trenches. So he jumped across one of the trenches, but his foot slipped and he like slammed into the ground. Like his lower body slid into the trench and then his upper body slammed into the upper part of the trench.
And he like fractured a vertebrae or
something?
Well,
he said it's like he finished the rest of the race, which was like a 12-mile obstacle course. And then like the next week or two, he said like it was just something hurting him. And he went into the doctor and got some x-rays. And the doctor came in with the x-rays like, all right, so when was your car accident? And my dad's like, I don't know what you're talking about. It's like, well, you have like breaks in your back. So that's when my dad stopped doing it. There was a zip line into a big pool of water. And my brother-in-law ruptured his eardrum falling into that pool of water.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so he got hurt on that one. I'm pretty sure I either hairline fractured or probably just really badly bruised my tailbone at the last Tough Mudder. So, like, everybody got hurt during the Tough Mudder.
I thought all you got was muddy or electrocuted. I didn't know we were talking about, like,
oh, no, man,
long-term injuries.
These are big waivers you have to sign doing that stuff. I still really want to do it, but nobody else is willing to, and I get that. There's no reason to put yourself through that kind of physical danger.
Well, now that you've said all this stuff, I'm going to have a hard time talking Alicia into it, but I still want to do one. I'm really doing
You don't have to go as gung-ho as we do. So that's part of the reason we get hurt is we're jumping over the trenches that you're supposed to climb through, that kind of thing.
Right.
What I do find, and this might help you out, is if you have to have, at least for me, I know I have to have looming obligations hanging over my head in order to help motivate me to do the extra things. Like you get home from work and you're tired, you just want to sit down. But for example, I have signed up for a half marathon, and I signed up for it 3 or 4 months ago, and it's not until January. And so I have this looming obligation to run 13 miles. So like I have to go get my training in. Like I can't just sit on my butt all day.
So they talked about that in the scarcity book, if you remember.
I do.
When you're feeling a burst of motivation, then you sign up for that half marathon 6 months from now, and then you have to train for it between now and then.
Well, theoretically, you have to train for it. If you're the kind of person that holds yourself to certain standards, then you will train for it, but you don't have to.
And I have the benefit of still being in the military, and I have to pass my annual fitness exam, which has components of push-ups and sit-ups, a waist measurement, and a 1.5 mile run. And if I don't meet minimum thresholds on each of those categories, or if I don't perform well enough in all of the categories, I'll either fail or be in a remedial status, both of which are undesirable, much more so than the other. But I have to meet those standards or I could lose my job.
And the 1.5 miles, like I still take issue with that. That is the absolute worst distance to try to gauge somebody's like aerobic endurance, especially the times that they put on it. I remember when I was still in, like the failing time for a 1.5 miles was like 12 minutes or something. And so that's just too fast. I don't run that fast. Like I run a lot. I can my average run right now is 5 miles. Like I can run. But like when the PT test came around, I would always have to stop whatever long distance training I was doing. And I would have to train for speed because I just don't run that fast.
I don't know anything about how they come up with the standards. What that means as far as the average task that's expected of an airman in combat. But I think, for the most part, I just think of the fitness test like the SAT or the ACT. It's not about every single thing that you could or can learn in high school or college. It's just a way to stratify people and set a minimum standard of performance and then hold them to a standard, and it doesn't really matter that it's not a perfect representation of everything. The Army's going through a process right now where they're trying to come up with a perfect representation of everything, and I think it's a fool's errand.
Well, I think there's a perfect representation doesn't exist, but I think there's a better option. I had a theory for the better PT test. Do you care to hear it?
Sure.
All right. So administratively, it's much more complicated, and I understand that. But you take the different aspects of the PT test, and they always say like, oh, well, the push-ups and the sit-ups are supposed to measure your physical strength. And then the run is supposed to measure your physical endurance. Okay, well then why don't you give people options to test and measure their physical endurance? Say like, all right, so we're going to do the physical endurance test for these people on this day. You can either do a 1.5 mile run for time, or you can do a 3 mile run for time, or you can do a 12-mile bike, or you can do like a 250-meter swim. And so that just giving people options like that would allow them to keep going with whatever training regimen they're doing and then demonstrate that, yes, I am physically fit in whatever way fit into their lifestyle already.
Yeah, but when you have to do that for all of 300,000 people, it just has a lot of overhead associated with it, and you have to simplify.
I started this whole thing with administrative overhead is increased by this. I realize the limitations. There are ways around it, and there's ways to mitigate it. Like instead of saying like you sir have to go take this test on this day, it would be much more people with ID numbers from this range to this range have to get one of these tests done in this window, and you just have some guy sitting at the gym ready to do these tests. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's still just a time commitment that's required. If you're going to proctor it and proxy it, then it's going to take there's overhead associated not just with the individual that's taking it, but the people that administer it. And there's no getting away from it. You can't just say, oh, we'll trade a 3 mile run for a 1.5 mile run, because that's going to take more than twice as long.
I get that. And the math that needs to be done is the juice worth the squeeze? How many people are actually physically fit that are failing the current PT test? That's
the right question.
Yeah, that's the real question. Is like, let's look at the people that failed the PT test. How many people should have passed it? Or how many people realistically can pass it? But they didn't because of the standards that we set.
And I'm convinced that's the reason we haven't seen any substantial changes in the last 15 to 20 years in the test, is because for the most part, the people that are the outliers on both directions, although we've had a few deaths this year, which is kind of disconcerting, but the ones who are fit but aren't passing the test are very, very small.
You shouldn't die from doing push-ups, sit-ups, and then a run. Like, that's ridiculous.
I know. I don't know if I want to get into that right now. So since you've gotten out of the military, you still, you probably have friends, and I have, that get out and immediately just stop with any degree of fitness or discipline when it comes to eating, and you see what they look like after a year or two.
Yeah, the threat of losing your job was the only thing keeping them eating healthy or exercising at all.
You got it, and then they just stop. And you haven't done that. What has kept you going?
Narcissism, mostly. I mean, that's it. That's all it is.
You don't want to be a fat old man.
Basically, and I've said this before to multiple people, is if you don't, if you're not a professional athlete, or if your physical fitness isn't directly related to your job, then the only reason to work out or run is to look better naked.
I guess so.
Yeah.
I don't want to buy new clothes, and that's another one.
So there's some economic value there for you too. No, but I mean, people's self-worth, a lot of, not just me, but there's a lot of people in the world that derive a lot of confidence and a lot of just self-worth from being in shape and being fit and looking the way that they want to look. And that's not even going into the whole idea of society pushing what the ideal masculine or feminine form is supposed to be. And that's a whole nother...
There's other aspects to it as well. I mean, there's also the potential just for optimum health, for living a long life.
I mean, yeah, that's true.
I didn't mention this, but one of the things about me getting overweight is when I get over about 185, I start getting heartburn. And I can take pills to make it go away, but they're just temporary. They're just kind of holding back the fire. And once I lose some weight and get below that 185, I stop getting it.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, so I can do this thing where okay, I got too fat and now I'm getting heartburn, so I just take a heartburn pill and that makes the heartburn go away. But then do I start getting hypertension, or what other bad health consequences do I have? Do I get diabetes or?
Oof, I have not been. I'm not trying to say anything bad about you, but I've never been to a point where I started having noticeable physical
health consequences.
Health consequences from being that much out of shape. I think the worst that I've ever gotten was I would go for a run if I hadn't run in a while, and then I would actually feel my gut bouncing up and down as I ran. That's the worst I think that's ever happened to me. Where before, you just wouldn't feel it. You would just run and you wouldn't feel anything. But now you actually feel oh, is this why women wear big sports bras? This is annoying.
I'm going to need something to control this.
It's I really wish I had some support device.
And you can take that approach. There's a lot of ways in the world to continue to try to address the symptoms of it rather than go at the root cause.
Oh, because the root cause is hard. It's you're talking about. You feel pressure and obligations to do other things in your life versus going to the gym. It's difficult. It's taxing to plan a healthy meal and then to eat it, when you just really want a slice of Domino's pizza.
Right. No, that's a great example. So how has being out of the military changed your regimen? I know you still have your own motivation, which is good, but now that you don't have to meet a specific test and standard, what do you do? Yeah,
being separated from the not talking about the motivation factor. Motivation is different. Now, what do I am motivated to stay in shape, so what do I choose to do? Because there's no box that I have to fit in at the end of every 6-month period or whatever. Right.
You don't have somebody measure your waist with a tape.
Exactly. So I do a lot of the things that I want and none of the things that I don't want. So for me, that's a lot of long runs. I don't like running fast. It makes me uncomfortable. But going for a 5-mile run, I find very relaxing and I feel good afterward. So I do long runs. I don't like doing fast runs. When I go to the gym, I don't focus on push-ups and sit-ups, which are a specific muscular endurance thing. I do the lifts that I get. Well, I guess that's another consequence of it, is I'm focusing on lifts that are economic and efficient, in that I want to work as many muscles as I can as quickly as possible, because at the time I was time crunched because I had to be done at a certain time to get to work. So, but the ability to I'm not forced to do things that'll make me better at push-ups and sit-ups. I can do these total body workouts, so I can focus more on leg workouts and squats and some of the powerlifting stuff, or I can do arms today and not feel bad because I've got the PT test coming up and I didn't do push-ups today. That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So Well, it goes back into the motivation, right? Is going to the gym. I don't dread it as much because when I go to the gym, I know I'm just going to do the things that I like to do, and maybe I'll motivate myself and do a couple of the things that are uncomfortable, but that I can still do.
But and that's a sign of an underlying problem with our fitness program. If we can take someone like you that's inherently internally motivated and make you dread going to the gym.
Well, it wasn't so much dread going to the gym. It was dreaded what I had to do. It's like, well, I've got to go work out today, but instead of doing the 5-mile run that I want to do, I have to do interval training on the track to make sure I'm ready and running fast enough for the 1.5 miles.
But that could be the official slogan. The United States military, making fun things miserable since 1776.
Yeah. That's absolutely true, because now, like, a camping trip in Valley Forge sounds great, but all the historical accounts sound terrible.
Let's cross the Delaware. Yeah. No.
Yeah, on Christmas at night. Oh, screw you, General Washington.
You took all the fun out of it.
We were supposed to be opening presents.
All right. Well, let's distill down all of this into something I can do and come up with a deadline. Then you can be my accountability partner.
Yeah, your accountability buddy?
Yeah, so you were talking about first just kind of baselining my activity, particularly related to my diet,
yes.
and determining where the problem parts are. I'm definitely accustomed to understanding the what you said, the calories in, calories out math equation. And I think that's a good place to start. Just figure out where my pinch points are, like, do I snack too much in the evenings, or do I, take in low nutrition, high calorie foods at certain points in the day, and then figure out what to do about it.
Exactly. And then it'll help you identify where the problem points are, like you said. And then you can make informed decisions on where you need to focus your attention on.
And I find that, again, back to the scarcity thing, I find it much easier to prioritize working out above, like, family commitments and being there at work when I'm not necessarily needed and stuff like that, when I'm getting closer to my fit test. And since I test in June every year, I can feel the tension mounting, and I'll be able to prioritize that stuff better. But probably my time for working out is afternoons, and I feel best when I'm going 3 days a week and then doing something independently on a Saturday. So I need to identify the problems with my diet and get my workouts a bit more frequent, and I think I can probably be back down to 185 by June. And
so for me, it's always less of a numbers game. Like, obviously you have those goals, like I would like to be 240, or you would like to be
my
down
body set that number. It's like you start getting heartburn above 185.
It's all about how you look and how you feel. Like you said, like with the feeling especially, like just get to a point where you feel like it's a balance, because this is the biggest problem we have in society today, when you're especially talking about weight loss, is people will go on these, like, either like the trend workouts or the trend diets, and they'll push really, really hard for some set period of time. They'll achieve their goal, and then they'll just abandon everything. And then it turns into this balloon factor where you spend this time slimming down, working really hard, and you spend the rest of the time doing nothing and swelling back up.
Did you ever find that, like, right after you passed your PT test, you had trouble maintaining motivation to work out?
No, I never had trouble. Honestly, whenever my PT test was done, I was relieved, because then I could go back to doing the workouts that I wanted to do.
Yeah, you had a different problem than I have.
So this is, like I mentioned this at the end of the last episode, staying in shape is much harder than getting in shape, because you have the clear goal. I need to be able to pass the PT test, and I want to weigh 180 by this set date, and that motivates you, and that keeps you, that looming deadline keeps you in the tunnel. Haha. And so you're focused on the goal, and you're going to take the actions that you need to achieve it. What you need to do is have sustainable long-term changes in your lifestyle, so that after you've reached your goal, you still are able to maintain the diet restrictions that you put on yourself, without them being so cumbersome or so uncomfortable that you immediately abandon them.
That's part of the reason I have a hard time right now, is because when I turned 40, the standards that I had to accommodate had gone down enough, and it was easy enough for my size and body type that I had a lot of slack, and I've consumed it.
Got it. You could for a while, you could just phone it in and you'd be fine.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Well, no longer, sir. You have wasted your grace period.
I know.
So now I would encourage you not only to make these changes to reach your immediate deadline, but then also make these changes in such a way as you can incorporate them into your lifestyle so you maintain the trend. Maybe you can back off a little bit. Maybe if you're working out, 4 or 5 times a week getting ready for the PT test, and maybe afterwards you back it off to, 2 times a week. But as long as you're doing something, then that's better than doing nothing.
Yep. All right. Did you want to talk about any of these other topics you had queued up?
Yes, of course. I want to talk about everything that I always have queued up. But
do it.
We're all right. So one little tiny thing that I want to mention is my grandmother had her birthday party this last weekend, where we cooked the pig for her and did the whole Hawaiian thing, and it worked out, and it turned out really, really well. And if we want to have the long story, or if people are interested in hearing about our trials and tribulations about learning how to slow roast an entire pig underground, because we had to do trial runs because the first one was just awful, but we nailed it, and we actually got it to work at the last minute. So that was great. One thing that I noticed while I was at that party, though, was the changes that have occurred in blender technology since I bought my Osterizer back in blender technology, like a liquid blender, right?
Yeah.
Because I talked about that. My first paycheck I ever spent out of my first job in high school.
Absolutely. You bought yourself a nice new blender.
I bought myself what I thought at the time was top of the line. It was like chrome and high-powered motor and had the on-off switch, and that was it. And I thought, this is it. This is the pinnacle of human liquefaction technology, right?
So you're saying that's not the case?
No, sir. Because my sister-in-law and my brother have what is apparently the actual pinnacle of blender technology. It was this Vitamix, something like that, blender. And the thing was enormous. I can't even. It was like 9 inches square. This thing was in just the base of it, and they put in frozen pineapple slices and milk or whatever, and then they had this big round dial on the front, and they just said, "Oh, I want a smoothie," and then and then they hit go, and then it altered its speeds, and then during the process. It started really coarse and then got faster as the stuff inside was putting up less force. I think it was...
Are you suggesting that this thing sensed the amount of resistance it was feeling from the fluid?
I honestly think that's what it was, because at certain points through its blending process, it would transition speeds. It blew my mind, this thing. And I asked him, what is this monstrosity? And apparently it's like a $400 or $500 blender, but they're huge into smoothies and juicing and that kind of thing. So they use it and they need it. But I was just absolutely floored at the advancements that humankind has made in blending technology.
So now we know what to get you for Christmas, I guess.
I mean, I wouldn't use that.
Did you come away going, I have got to have one of these?
No, because I don't use blenders anymore. We're talking about fitness and getting older. I can't have a giant, 2-quart milkshake every night after dinner and maintain my waistline. That's just not going to happen. Yeah,
and you don't want to do meal replacement milkshake thing?
No, no, I'm not going to do that. No, actually, this is a funny tangent. My brother remembered that I liked milkshakes when I was a younger kid, right? And so for my birthday, this has to be 6 or 7 years ago now, he bought me a milkshake maker. One of the ones you see in the old soda shops, where it's just got the long stick and the little tiny blender thing at the bottom, and you put the steel cup on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he bought me one of those, and it was awesome. And I did have a milkshake every day after dinner for 2 or 3 months, and I must have put on 10 pounds.
Thanks, bro.
Yeah, thanks, man. I will still bust it out every once in a while and then have milkshakes for a week, but that I can't go any longer than that. It will have long-term ramifications on my health.
Yeah. So when I came back from the States, some of my pots and pans were getting old, and I went to Sam's Club and I just bought what looked like an ordinary non-stick pan, and I brought that thing home and cooked with it, and I was astonished that they had invented non-stick cookware that was actually non-stick.
You're right, because the pots and pans are something you just have forever. You're never going to replace it.
It had a white surface inside of it, and you could crack an egg and throw it in there with no lubrication whatsoever and just shake the pan and it would slide around.
Oh, I don't know. No, that's not a thing.
Yes,
that can't possibly
it
exist.
is. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. And
I don't believe you.
Just
I don't
like
believe you telling
thought,
me this.
I thought, certainly there's only, blenders. What more can you do? You turn it on and it spins around. Like, what else is there to do? Well, there was more technology to be had in the area of nonstick cookware.
There was some materials engineer that got his PhD. Some guy like focused on that. Like, I will never put up with eggs sticking to my pan ever again. And like got his doctorate and like went to this engineering firm and created this substance. That's awesome.
Yep.
I need those. I need these nonstick pans apparently.
I know, and I need a new blender. Okay, we've reached the end here, Josh, but there was one other thing I wanted to do. There's this new series on Netflix that just came out a couple of weeks ago with Paul Rudd, who is awesome.
Okay.
I believe.
What's it called?
It's called Living with Yourself. There's a trailer, and they give away kind of the central conceit in the trailer, but I think it's the journey that's the fun part. And the conceit is that he and accidentally clones himself and ends up with two of him running around in the world, and kind of what hijinks ensue, and also what you think about yourself and how your concept of yourself is influenced when there's another one of you around.
So it has the slapstick comedy of multiplicity with the deep inner reflection of, I don't know, a serious movie.
If there was a slider between those two things, it would be like if 10 was serious movie and 0 was multiplicity, it would be like a 9. It's way more on the contemplative part than the Michael Keaton part.
How dare you put multiplicity at 0, sir? Multiplicity was at least like a 2.
I just meant on a scale of 0 to 10 with 1 at one side and 1 at the other side. Yes.
I got you.
So if you're with me, let's watch Living with Yourself, and we'll discuss on the next episode.
Okay. And you want to watch the whole series or just a handful of episodes?
So Paul Rudd went on, I don't remember, Jimmy Fallon or something like that, and he characterized the show as, he's like, sometimes when you watch a show on Netflix, you feel like you're making a serious commitment. He's like, these are 8 30-minute episodes. He's like, this show is the cornhole of television shows. Like, anybody can do it.
Oh,
you just pick it up and watch it. It's easy.
Yeah, I mean, 8 episodes at 20 minutes, that'll be easy. We can do that.
Okay.
So, homework is 2 weeks to watch 8 episodes of a 30-minute Netflix show.
Yep, Living with Yourself.
Yeah. We're really boxing out all of our listeners that don't have Netflix.
Yeah, darn it. But if you don't have Netflix and you're looking for a reason, or if you do, or if you don't have Netflix and you don't care anyway, but you're interested in hearing a couple of guys discuss the ethical obligations and life considerations of what it might be like to clone yourself.
This is another excellent illustration of the difference between you and I, because my first reaction is, if you don't have Netflix, then please get in your time machine and go back to 1998 where you came from.
So, teaser for next time, Living with Yourself, Paul Rudd on Netflix. Well, that being said, I think it's time that we give a big shout out to our listeners. I think it's important that we thank them, people who are sticking with us and our new listeners that are joining in. If you want to show your appreciation to the show, please go on your favorite podcast app, particularly iTunes. If you're on there, go on and give us a rating. I think so far we've only had 2 people rate us. So if you're the kind of person that likes a challenge, go on and give us a rating on iTunes. If you'd like to join in the discussion, I'll post some of the stuff we talked about today, pictures of our costumes and a few other things on our Facebook page, Bad at Magic Facebook, and or you can go to our website, badatmagic.live. Thanks to all our listeners. Thanks for being with us throughout the podcast, and we hope to talk to you next time.
Awesome, yeah. Thanks all of our listeners, our dedicated family members, and random people throughout the world. Please join in the discussions. If you have comments or you want us to talk about certain things, feel free to send the suggestions. I'll ignore them, but I'm sure Ben will read them.
All right, cool. Thanks, buddy.